Good morning and welcome to my studio. I'm going to talk to you today about commissions. Commissions can be a really integral part of your career and can actually, significantly add to your income and increase that kind of stability of steady income coming in. But the whole idea of doing commissions is also potentially filled with a ton of pitfalls that could lead to real disappointment and actually make it to the point where you don't even want to go into your studio and paint. So I'm going to talk about my experience over my career with commissions and with the solution that I've come up with now in terms of how I take on commissions. So that whole idea of commissions is basically the difference between it and a regular painting is typically, I go into the studio, I paint what I want to paint. And I paint what I think will make a really great painting. And then you put it out there and you try to find a buyer for it. And a commission is where someone comes to you with a specific request for a painting, and then you complete a painting, hopefully that person is then going to purchase. Now the whole idea of commissions is really it's a sliding scale in terms of how much input the client actually has into it. So when I first started doing commissions, when I was still in the police force, I was doing a lot of portraits. So there the client had an incredible amount of input. So right from the actual photo shoot itself, the client would be very much involved in terms of the pose or multiple poses if there were several figures in it. And then the client was also involved in kind of choosing the photograph and often blending elements from one photograph to another to give them the painting that they see in their mind's eye. And so that's a really, really specific type of commission where you're working with the client, but you're basically creating in their mind an idea of what the finished painting is going to be. And then you have to actually create that finished painting that they are hoping to achieve. Now that can be incredibly difficult to do. But the upside of it is when you do it really well, the rewards are very satisfying. I mean, aside from just kind of, completing the transaction and earning the money for your commission, when I used to do a lot of the portrait commissions, there would be tears when the painting was unveiled. So that's really powerful stuff. When you can create a painting that makes people cry because they just love it so much, and it's of a loved one of theirs, and you've kind of captured for all time that feeling that they have about that person, that can be incredibly rewarding. The downside of doing commissions, and particularly commissions like that, is you end up spending your time not creating paintings that you want to create, but creating paintings that other people want you to create. And for a time, for me, actually, that was quite satisfying. But after several years of continually doing that, I just started to find myself just not eager to paint anymore, and particularly not eager to paint those paintings. I wanted to go in and paint the paintings that I wanted to do, but I didn't have the time to do that because I was creating all of these paintings for other people. And then I had a couple of really bad experiences with the whole commission process, and that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back when I really started backing away from the commissions. So I will tell you a couple things that I've learned, and the number one rule when you're doing a commission is anyone who has any sort of decision at the end of the process in terms of whether they will accept the painting or not, they have to be involved in every aspect of discussing the commission. If they're not, I would refuse to actually take on the commission. And so I'll give you an example of what led me to that decision. Because I'd had a very high success rate of doing commissions, and pretty much everyone, the people were thrilled with it. But I got called to do one commission, and it was a family portrait of a young girl and her brother and their dog, and the mother was commissioning it, but she was commissioning it for her husband for his birthday. Now this was at a very posh area of Toronto, and they were obviously very well to do, and the husband was a big corporate executive type who was very, very busy. And then it was made clear to me that he was too busy to be involved in the actual discussion of the portrait. And actually, once when I was there, I met him, and the client, his wife, tried to get him in to get his input, and he said, "Oh, whatever you want is fine. I'm sure I'll love it." So anyways, we went ahead, we did the photo shoot, we got some great photos, we came up with a composition, and the client, who was the mother, said to me, "I don't want it to be really, really tight realism like a lot of your work. I want it to be a little more painterly." And this was in watercolor too. So when you're painting in watercolor, you don't have a huge amount of room to come back in and change things like you do in oils. So anyways, I painted the painting. It turned out fabulous. I took it down to show her. She cried, immediately put it up on the mantelpiece, and paid me for it, just couldn't thank me enough. Then I got a phone call a couple days later from her, and it's like, oh, there's a problem. Her husband doesn't really like the painting. He was hoping for something that was a little more high realism, like some of my other work that he'd seen. And so this was the guy who was too busy to be involved in the discussions. Now was asserting his opinion that he wanted something less painterly and more high realism, when the client had in fact instructed me not to do high realism, but to do more painterly. And then I said, well, there's only so much that I can do with this now. It is a watercolor, but it's like, if you want to come out to my studio and spend a day and I will tighten things up under your direction, then I'm willing to do that. But no, he was too busy to be involved in that. So basically wanted their money back. And so I went down, picked up the painting. They ended up saying, here's a couple $100 for your time, which, at that time I needed the couple $100, but that was a week's worth of work, and it was about a $2,500 commission. So that just really, really went down the wrong way. And that really kind of started that whole slide for me away from commissions. And so that's the whole thing. If you are going to do a commission, you need to make sure that whoever is going to be involved in the ultimate kind of yay or nay when it comes time to actually accepting the commission, they have to be involved in the discussions, if it's a fairly detailed type commission like that one was. And so for the longest time then, I actually quit doing commissions. I actually used to do commissions, when people would show me photographs of their cottage or whatever, and I would do that because early in my career I needed the money. But it just got to the point where I would rather cut the grass or do laundry than go in the studio and work on a commission, and that's not a good place to be. So I started backing off, and I actually had kind of a total moratorium on commissions for a number of years. But then what started happening is I got to know a lot of my clients who were purchasing my work, and they would say things like, I love this series that you've done. This, for example, which is of the birch trees with the maple trees and the sun coming through the trees. Just a very basic description. But they'd say, like, we need something in a 24 by 36 or a 36 by 72. And what my clients realized, and I realized very quickly too, was like, if they were just going to wait for the opportunity on the off chance that I ever did a painting of that subject matter and that size, and that it be available for them to actually see, because my work does tend to sell very quickly, then people could be waiting their whole life and never ever have that opportunity. So I did start taking on commissions. I call them quasi-commissions because in a typical commission, you're painting a painting for that client. And the other thing that I would do if I was going to continue doing commissions in the old way, I would start taking a deposit and saying at the end, if you refuse the commission, that's fine, but the deposit's non-refundable because they are taking up your time. Now, when I started out and I was just eager to get as much business as possible, my policy was, no deposit. If you don't like it, you don't buy it. But then what I did realize is there will be certain people that will take advantage of that, as that one case in point. But what I do now is I'll say to people the very most amount of information I will take is if they either refer it to another painting of mine that I've done that they like and that they say I would like something similar to this in a certain size. Then I'll go ahead and do that. Actually I should say too, if I think it will translate well, because some of the small paintings that I've done, while they're brilliant little small paintings, they won't necessarily translate well into a 4 foot by 5 foot or a 4 foot by 7 foot. But if what the client wants in general is something that I would be interested in painting in that size, then I will go on and take it on. But there is no commitment required on the part of the client. So basically all that happens is I will go and complete the painting, and when it's finished, they'll get first right of refusal. And if they like it, they buy it. If they don't like it, then it will just go out to my galleries. And part of the whole commission thing too is I take very, very little input into the actual painting, because what ends up happening is people think that they know more than you. About what they know what they think they want, but they don't know what will make a good painting. So I've had in the past, initially when I started doing this, I actually took a little more direction. So people would say, oh, I'd like something like this with the birches and the red leaves, but I'd also like an opening in there so that we can see the reflection on the water. And I'd like there to be a dramatic cloud pattern in the sky. And you end up doing that, and it's like too many cooks spoil the soup, or too much stuff in there kind of takes away from the overall impression of the painting. I mean, there's a reason why I have never done a painting with all of those elements in it, because it's too much. So what I have found is there's a tendency for people to look at all the elements of my painting and say, oh, I'd like this and this and this and this. And I just say, no, like that's too much. And I really try to get across to them that I'm not painting a painting for them. That's the last thing I want to be doing, and the last thought I want to have in my mind. So this is actually a 4 foot by 5 foot commission I'm working on now. The last thought I want to have in my mind at any time during the painting process is, what would the client like? Because I don't care what the client likes, because what the client thinks they would like is very likely not going to make this a better painting. It's going to detract from it. So the way that I like to explain it to my clients is, I'm not doing a painting for you. I'm doing a painting for me. I'm going to try to make it the absolute best painting possible. But based on the input that you've given me, I think there's a very, very good chance that you're going to love this painting and want it. And then at the end of the painting process, they get a chance to see it and they make that decision. And the good thing about this is if they do like it and decide to buy it, that's great. Everyone's happy. You've created a painting specifically in the size and subject matter that they want, that they might have had to wait years to actually find one like that available. And you've concluded a sale very quickly. But if they don't like it, and this is what's really important, if they don't like it, I still have a painting that I love, that I can put out there that someone else will buy. If you end up doing a painting very specifically for a client, and in particular, if you do things that you know are not going to make the painting the absolute best possible, if they decline to take it, now what are you going to do with it? Whether it's obviously if it's a very specific painting of their cottage with their family in it, there's nothing you can do with it. It's going to go in the garbage. But even if it's a painting like this, where I've made compromises over what I thought would make the painting the absolute best, to whether it be, often they'll say, I want these colors in or whatever. And what I'll tell them is, if during the painting process there's an opportunity to do that and it's going to make the painting better, then I will do it. but I'm not going to create a painting to go with your couch or to go with your curtains or whatever. Because at the end of the day, if you don't like it, it needs to be the best painting possible so that I can sell it to someone else. And so that's kind of my commission process, and it works very well. And it's still not foolproof. It's still, I probably, about 2 out of 10 commissions that I take on, the clients end up saying, oh, gee, that's not really what we were looking for. And it's like, that's fine, because it'll go out there and it'll go out to someone else. And they have all sold eventually to someone else. And that also just makes me really glad that, boy, I'm really glad I didn't go very specific and create a painting that I really wasn't excited about, because there's still a chance that the client's not going to like it. And if you don't love it, then what are you going to do with it? So that's my take on commissions. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this and your experiences as well. And I do know too, like for me, commissions is not something that I'm not looking to take on a huge amount of them, because I don't want to be in a situation where like the next 4 months of my studio time is spoken for in terms of painting what other people want me to paint, even though it might be stuff that I like doing. I like the ability for the most part to come in the studio when I finished a piece and just think, what do I want to do? Do I want to do a 4 foot by 5 foot, or do I want to do an 18 by 18? But I do like having commissions spaced out over the course of the year. If I do 6 commissions a year or 7 commissions a year, that actually makes me happy, because it is nice when you're working on a piece knowing that, okay, there's a very good chance that you've got the client already lined up that's going to take it. So that's my thoughts on commissions. I hope you found this helpful. As always, if you have, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe, share this with your friends, and I welcome your comments and questions. I'm Tim Packer, and I thank you for your time.